I'm studying plants and animals to build a strong foundation for any future concept art project. The real life references help me practice structure and design so I can later create original characters and places that feel believable and detailed. It's both preparation and inspiration for my creative project. In the meantime, I also want to keep practicing character and environment design. To do that, I've decided to explore some classic fantasy stereotypes like knights, wizards, elves, and so on. Even though they are familiar, studying and recreating these archetypes will help me better understand the visual language of fantasy, which will be useful when I start developing my own world. I know my project won't be entirely original. It will likely be filled with familiar fantasy tropes, because that's the kind of world I grew up loving. That's why I created the Realm of Placehold area as a side project, a space where I can throw in everything I make without overthinking. It doesn't need a deep history, internal logic, or realism, just a place for freeform exploration. With Placehold area, I can practice, experiment, and enjoy the creative process without the pressure of making everything perfect. For example, when I was studying dog breeds, I tried incorporating some odd or ancient breeds into Placehold area, and it turned out into a fun creative challenge. Now I've decided to start adding some simple characters to the mix. The character I'm currently working on is one of those. He's a young elven ambassador sent to deliver a message from his ruler. I designed him to resemble a classic D&D style character, a bit generic, equipped with a staff and capable of basing magic. He travels alone, relying on his skills to protect himself, especially during peacetime missions. Even this simple character turned out to be a real challenge. I found myself questioning how elves should look in a fantasy world, what kind of ears, what hairstyle, and especially what kind of costume would suit him. Designing the outfit made me realize how much backstory is needed for strong character design. I had to think about the materials this culture might use, their level of technology, what colors are common or symbolic, and what motifs or symbols would appear in their metalwork or embroidery. Even the staff, which ended up looking pretty generic, reminded me that to design better characters in the future, I need to consider all of these elements beforehand, not just the look, but the world they belong to. I really struggled with this character design, and it taught me the importance of better planning. Next time I know I should gather references for each piece, clothing, accessories, weapons before diving in. Even though I'm not happy with how it turned out, I'm still glad I did this study. I spent about 3 hours on it, and while it's not fully rendered, I feel like it could have been a decent illustration with 2 more hours of work, especially to fix his face. But more importantly, if I had spent those extra 2 hours beforehand researching and collecting references, the outcome would likely have been much stronger. This process made it clear that good design starts long before the drawing begins. Then I wanted to give this character a journey. I began to wonder where he might be delivering the message he carries. Since he's a classic elven messenger in a typical fantasy world, it felt natural to imagine him traveling to a dwarven stronghold. That led me to start thinking about the environment, maybe the dwarven fortress carved into the side of a mountain with heavy stone architecture, deep tunnels and narrow torchlit corridors. Visualizing this helped me consider the world around the character more deeply and made the process of designing both him and his destination feel more connected. I started with a very rough thumbnail sketch just to get a sense of all the overall composition, then refined it using a perspective grid. Since the character is on a journey to this place, I wanted to capture the moment he arrives, standing before the grand gates of the dwarven fortress. I positioned him in the foreground, gazing up at the towering stone entrance across a massive stone bridge. This gave the sense of scale and narrative. He's finally reached his destination, and now he must cross that final threshold to deliver his message. Creating characters has always come more natural to me. It's the part of drawing I'm most familiar with. On the other hand, I've occasionally practiced environment design, so I wanted to keep this one simple. Designing an entire cityscape felt overwhelming, but imagining a fortress gate carved into a mountainside paired with a straightforward stone bridge was manageable. I also realized that focusing on more organic elements like rock formations and cliffs made the composition easier. By leaning into natural shapes rather than intricate man-made structures, I was able to complete an environment study that still supported the story without becoming too complex. Even the smaller elements, the gate, the flags, and the bridge, weren't easy to design because I hadn't planned their details beforehand. Once again, I realized I needed more background information about the world. I tried adding some symbols, but they ended up feeling really boring. Next time I tackle something like this, I think I'll create unique patterns, runes, or meaningful symbols, even for a simple dwarven clan. That way, these details will add personality and depth to the environment, making the design more engaging. I also realized that I don't know much about architecture. Even something as simple as a stone bridge requires understanding how it actually holds together. So I think I should start studying architecture soon. For a world building project, it's not enough to only study animals and plants. I need to broaden my knowledge far beyond those. If I learn more about architecture, I think I'll be able to create more believable structures like bridges and gates, and maybe even add interesting details that make the environment feel richer. So instead of focusing on complex architectural elements, I decided to add this giant dwarven statue on top of the gate. I haven't drawn many dwarves before, but since it's essentially a character, it felt more within my comfort zone. The gate that the character is about to enter was always meant to be the main subject of this piece, so I built the composition around it, and the statue naturally became part of that focal point. I also looked at references of classic fantasy dwarven locations, and many of them included similar statues. So in the end, I'm still building my own version of a generic dwarven setting. So I found out that studying generic or stereotypical fantasy elements can actually be a real effective way to practice both drawing skills and foundational concept art thinking. These tropes like elven messengers, dwarven gates, or magical staffs come with built-in visual language and expectations, which makes them easier to experiment with while learning. By working within familiar frameworks, I can focus more on practicing design, composition, anatomy, and storytelling without the pressure of reinventing everything from scratch. And because these archetypes are so common in fantasy, learning how to design them well is also a useful step toward future concept artwork. Even if you're working for a client, they might expect variations on these themes. Even the composition in this piece was inspired by the classic traveling stick salesman trope. A small, lone figure shown from behind, carrying a staff or bag, journeying towards something much larger than themselves. It's a visual shorthand for adventure, solitude, and the beginning of a quest. You often see it in fantasy art, a tiny character standing before a towering city, mountain, or mysterious gate. I realized I unconsciously followed that idea when I packed my elf character looking up at that massive dwarven gate, crossing a bridge to enter a new place. It's a powerful and simple way to tell a story through composition, showing scale, emotion, and narrative all at once. So, I originally planned to include some mist under the bridge to add depth and atmosphere, but while painting, I realized the image was starting to look too grayscale and visually flat. Even though it wasn't part of the plan, I decided to add a dramatic touch, fire glowing from the depths below the bridge. Its source is unknown, and that's the fun part of doing these kinds of studies. Since this is just another practice piece and not a finished story, I can leave it open-ended. Maybe it's an abyss, maybe it's hellfire rising from a gorge and the dwarves built their fortress above it. The ambiguity invites the viewer to imagine their own story, and then that mystery makes the process really enjoyable for me. In the end, even in the final illustration doesn't look as polished or impressive as I hoped for, this entire process was incredibly valuable. It reminded me that the goal isn't always to create something perfect, but to learn through doing. I explored character and environment design together, thought about storytelling and world building, and pushed myself beyond my comfort zone. I struggled, experimented, made decisions on the fly, and realized what I still need to study, like architecture, symbolism, costume, designing weapons, and better planning. Most importantly, I enjoyed it. This was a true practice piece, and it clearly showed me the direction I need to keep going in. So, see you in the next study.